everyone, welcome to Module 3, where we will be talking specifically about the heart anatomy, which is part of the cardiovascular system. In learning outcome number 1, we will be covering the difference between the pulmonary and the systemic circuits. Now, if you can imagine a very powerful organ that's no larger than your fist, and that has captivated poets and scientists and even dreamers throughout history, that would be your heart. In fact, beyond its biological significance, the heart will symbolize love and courage and the very essence of being a human. Just like the rhythmic beating that sustains life, the heart's tales are as diverse and enchanting as the emotions that it will house. And in ancient civilizations, the heart was believed to be the seat of the soul and the source of emotions. This intriguing belief speaks to the heart's profound connection to our innermost feelings and the mysteries of our existence. And some even thought it was the seat of intelligence. Although these theories they have proved false, emotions certainly affect heart rate, and only when your heart pounds or occasionally skips a beat do you become accurately aware of this dynamic organ. So let's get started and learn a little bit more about the heart anatomy. Despite its impressive workload, the heart is actually a small organ. It's going to be roughly the size of your clenched fist. And the heart's four muscular chambers, which are the right and left atria and the right and left ventricles, they will work together to pump blood through this network of blood vessels between the heart and the peripheral tissues. This network can be subdivided into two circuits. The pulmonary circuit, which carries carbon dioxide-rich blood from the heart to the gas exchange surfaces of the lungs, and then returns oxygen-rich blood from the lungs to the heart. Next, we have the systemic circuit, which will transport oxygen-rich blood to the rest of the body cells, and then returns the carbon dioxide-rich blood back to the heart. And then it starts all over again, going to the pulmonary circuit, and then coming back to the heart, and then going through the systemic circuit. So how does it actually work? The right atrium will receive the blood from the systemic circuit. So if it's receiving blood from the systemic circuit and arriving at the heart, this blood is going to be filled with carbon dioxide and waste products. From there, this blood will go into the right ventricle, which will then discharge this blood into the pulmonary circuit. And again, once it enters the pulmonary circuit, this means that it's in the lungs, where pulmonary means lungs. So in the lungs, it will exchange this carbon dioxide for oxygen-rich blood, which will then return back to the heart. And it returns back to the heart into the left atrium. This means that the left atrium will collect the blood from the pulmonary circuit. This blood will then go down into the left ventricle, where it's going to be ejected into the systemic circuit. Now, systemic circuit means that it will go to all the systems that are present in our body. In fact, as we can see from this image, the blood that's being injected right over here will then go to the upper body as it comes out from these blood vessels over here, which we will see later. And then the ones that are coming down through this other blood vessel, which is basically a continuation of this one that's coming down over here, will take the blood to the lower body. And like I said, since this blood is coming from the lung, it's now filled with oxygen. So with each normal heartbeat, the atria will contract first, followed by the contraction of the ventricles. And the two ventricles contract at the same time, and they will then eject equal volumes of blood into the pulmonary and the systemic circuits. Now notice how each circuit begins and ends at the heart. The other thing that I want to make sure that you understand is that atria is the plural for atrium. So you have a right atrium, a left atrium, or you have a right and left atria. Now, how will this blood that is leaving the heart reach all the cells in our body? They will get there through the blood vessels. There are three general types of blood vessels: the arteries, veins, and capillaries. And what is going to be the rule for the transport of blood? Well, arteries will transport blood away from the heart, and veins will return the blood to the heart. Can you say that the rule is also that arteries carry blood rich in oxygen and veins carry blood rich in carbon dioxide? No, you cannot do this. This is actually a big no-no, because remember that I said on the previous slide that the blood that is being ejected from the right ventricle into the lungs is a blood that's filled with carbon dioxide. This means that this carbon dioxide rich blood is leaving the heart and going into the lungs. Therefore, if it is leaving the heart, it is leaving through an artery. In fact, the name of this artery is the pulmonary trunk, which we can see on this image right over here. Trunk just means that it is one of the biggest arteries, and notice how this trunk is being represented by a blue color, meaning exactly this, that it is a carbon dioxide rich blood. Then, as we see right over here, the pulmonary trunk will split into pulmonary arteries going to both lungs. This means you will have the left pulmonary arteries and the right pulmonary arteries. Notice how both of them are still blue in color because they're still carrying carbon dioxide rich blood. Like mentioned, the carbon dioxide rich blood will be exchanged for oxygen rich blood in the lungs, and this exchange occurs at the level of the capillaries, as the capillaries are little tiny blood vessels that interconnect the smallest arteries and veins. And because they are very tiny, this means that the wall of the capillaries are very thin. In fact, if you can recall from our tissues lecture in A&P 1, it is going to be made up of simple squamous epithelium, which means that the capillaries have one single cell layer that will contain flat, thin cells. And this is what permits this fast exchange of carbon dioxide for oxygen. In addition to this gas exchange that occurs in the lungs, the capillaries will also permit the exchange of nutrients and waste products between the blood and the surrounding tissues in the systemic circuit. From the lungs, the oxygen-rich blood will travel back to the heart, and this means that if the blood is arriving at the heart, it will do so through a vein, right? Remember the rule. Blood that arrives to the heart does so through a vein. These veins are called the pulmonary veins. Makes sense, right? It doesn't get easier than this. These veins belong to the pulmonary circuit, therefore they are going to be called the pulmonary veins. And remember that these veins are carrying oxygen-rich blood, so this means that the color of this blood is bright red. And on this image, you can see the bright red right pulmonary veins carrying oxygen-rich blood from the right lung, and the left pulmonary veins carrying oxygen-rich blood from the left lung, and both will empty their contents into the heart. And where will they empty their contents into the heart? This will occur into the left atrium. From the left atrium, the blood will go down into the left ventricle, where it will be expelled from the heart into the systemic circuit. Since it is leaving the heart, it will do so through an artery, and this artery is called the aorta. It seems to me that most of you have probably heard of this artery before. If you haven't, it's not a problem, as I will definitely introduce it to you now. It is the biggest artery of our body, and for now, this is all the detail that you will need to know about the different types of blood vessels, as we will cover blood vessels specifically in Module 5. Therefore, we can conclude that blood travels through these circuits in a sequence. For example, blood returning to the heart in the systemic veins must complete the pulmonary circuit before they are able to re-enter the systemic arteries. I added this slide just to make sure that I talk about the main blood vessels that are leaving or arriving to the heart. So this image is a great image because it shows the heart, and you can see the pulmonary trunk, which is leaving. We know that the pulmonary trunk is an artery, and once it enters into the lung, it will split and become the pulmonary arteries. Remember that they are blue because they're taking blood rich in carbon dioxide into the lungs to be exchanged for oxygen. So if they're leaving the heart, they are going to be an artery. Then we have the pulmonary veins, which are the red ones, that will then be arriving to the heart into the left atrium. This blood will then come down into the left ventricle, and it will leave through the aorta. Now, the aorta is divided into three different parts. We have the ascending aorta, which is the part that goes up. So it's that first little part is called the ascending aorta. Then it will do a curve, and this curve is called the aortic arch. And then once it starts to go down, and we can see it coming down right over here. If we remove the heart on this image, we can see the aorta coming down right over here. This would be your descending aorta. The other thing that we see is the blood that's going to be arriving into the right atrium. It will be arriving through three main structures, two huge ones, which are the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. On this model here, we have the superior vena cava, and on an inferior view, we can see the inferior vena cava over here. On this other model, this would be the superior vena cava, and this is your inferior vena cava. And then it will also arrive inside of the right atrium through an opening, which is called the opening of the coronary sinus, which we will cover later on in this module. On these other images over here, we can see the pulmonary trunk, which will split into the pulmonary arteries, one on each side. Here would be the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and you can see a little bit of the descending aorta. We can also see on this posterior view, these would be your pulmonary arteries, and these are your pulmonary veins. Here we can see a little bit of the pulmonary vein as well, bringing the blood back into the left atrium. And these are all the major blood vessels that you need to know.